Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Vyazma. This is the new Russian Tier 9 experimental cruiser that's going to be available for the next few updates. These are temporary ships like Oregon. This one though shares a lot in common with the Tier 8 battleship Borodino. But it's in a cruiser slot. That means we get 406mm guns as a cruiser. And while we don't have the best armor up to battleship standards, for cruiser standards, this armor is absolutely amazing. Fortunately, as a balancing factor, this ship has a large citadel. Borodino has a gigantic, very easy to hit citadel when it's broadside. So if you make a mistake in this ship at close range, which is where these experimental ships want to play, you will at least get punished. So that's one good thing about this ship. That said, I think these experimental ships get even more busted the lower the tier we go. Yes, Oregon's crazy at tier 10, but Vyazma is maybe even more powerful as a tier 9. We'll look at the Metz later on. Probably tomorrow is when I'll take a look at that one. Here, just full sending in with Malta on the PTS server here. And it still has the same kind of gimmicks. We have this incredible super healing ability. We get 6 of those, by the way. We can buff that up pretty dramatically. In fact, with First Blood here, we get up to 7 of them. Absolutely insane. These burst fire shells do give you better pen as well as better pen angles. You have a limited stock on them, of course, but 11% pen, 55 to 65 degree AP ricochet angles means you're going to get some very, very nice damage in, even on super battleships. Patrie, well known for just eating shatters to its broadside, thanks to that kind of French black hole turtleback-esque armor. Nope, we just full pen straight through it. Absolutely amazing. As a cruiser, we also get access to some very nice cruiser commander skills. Top grade gunner, outnumbered. These skills are absolutely amazing on a ship like Vyazma that does want to push up and get into close range. Top grade giving us better reload anytime an enemy ship is within our detection range, and outnumbered. Whenever enemy ships outnumber friendly ships in our main gun range, we get a dispersion buff, which is pretty awesome on a burst ship like this one that already gives massive dispersion buffs whenever you're on lower HP. Given that these are experimental ships, I will go over it again on Vyazma, but anytime your HP goes down, much like Adrenaline Rush, you get stronger. In fact, Adrenaline Rush stacks with this fighter flight skill, which gives you also better reload on your main guns as you get lower. So they stack together. Not only that, fighter flight gives you better dispersion anytime you're on lower HP, down to a minimum value though. So it's not like it goes all the way to 0. But it's very, very powerful. Even though we're on very good HP here, we still have pretty alright dispersion. It's not quite actually as good as Borodino, interestingly. Borodino gets battle cruiser dispersion on its guns, where Vyazma gets battleship dispersion table, which is a downside. Yet that is completely mitigated by this fighter flight skill, giving us much improved dispersion. Even on reasonably high HP like we have right now, we already are getting noticeably better dispersion. This ship, much like the Oregon, retains better DPM at close range when you're using this burst fire. There is almost no reason to not use burst fire when you're at closer ranges, when you're in range to actually use it. Here, 13 kilometers, Oregon was 13.5 kilometers, so a small change there. As a tier 9 ship, when you get up tiered into super ships, you will suffer, okay? Admittedly, this is a decent weak point of these ships, that their real power, that burst fire coming through, is only limited to very close range gameplay, which I do like as a play style. I'm enjoying that these ships are at their best at close range. That is something I have wanted, admittedly. But I didn't want ships that were so gimmick heavy to be the reason that you're playing at such close range. I was hoping for a little more consistency out of more vanilla style ships, not consistency through insane gimmicks, I suppose. Patrie is, well, pretty close to us, and that means his secondaries are going to light some fires since he appears to be a secondary build. Also, the overmatch we do have to worry about. Our upper bow there, very much going to get overmatched by Patrie. Our deck armor and our upper belt armor is more than enough to bounce his shells though. So hopefully, if we don't take too much damage to our bow or our superstructure, in fact, we can survive a little bit longer. Much like the Oregon, we still have those fast reloading super heals. It's just really good, man. 60-second cooldown on a heal is already amazing. Sure, it may not be the 40 seconds like we see on Ohio, Georgia, and Massachusetts style, but still, 60 seconds is already a massive improvement, especially considering we have super healing here, giving us massive amounts of HP in return. And we also don't run out of healing. Oftentimes with super heals, like on the Salem, for example, you run out of potential healing, even though you have super heals available to you in the late game. And that's down to the amount of pen damage you can repair. Typical ships will only be able to repair 50% of pen damage, where Metz, Vyazma, and Oregon all have 75% pen damage repair. That's why you're seeing me take so much damage here, even from full pen, overmatching full pens here, and we're still able to get maximum value out of these heals. We're already up to 2.5 million potential damage in this one, so yes, it's a cruiser, but it's a pretty tanky cruiser, man. And perhaps not the most balanced thing in the world, considering at tier 9, I think being able to overmatch 27 millimeters of armor is actually a big deal. We see a lot of ships, tier 9, that have 27 millimeters of armor. A lot of cruisers still have 27 millimeters of armor these days. We see, well, maybe not the newer ones, I suppose, although a lot of them do still. But ships like Rune, ships like Seattle, ships like Buffalo, ships like Ibuki, there's so many tier 9 cruisers, which this thing will be competing against, that suddenly it overmatches with massively improved dispersion, reload, burst fire gimmick. It's going to be very difficult to fight a Vyazma if you're trying to play your tier 9 cruisers, as well as into down tiers. What happens when you're fighting tier 7 battleships? I know it's always going to be a struggle anytime you're up tiered 2 tiers. But if you're a tier 7 battleship, let's say Colorado, Nagato, for example, with 26 millimeters of armor, I believe, is what they have. Well, this ship is just going to burst fire overmatch you. And you only overmatch it in its upper bow, that is all. And it's got super healing. I know, it's a 2-tier difference, obviously. That's maybe stretching the truth a little bit too hard, but it is something that you're going to have to deal with here coming through with these experimental ships. At least they are temporary, so if my worries are confirmed going forward here, as I'm sure Wargaming is going to release them, disappointingly, I'm still holding out a small bit of hope that they reconsider and perhaps wait a little bit on this concept, maybe only put them in the game for PvE experiences. Again, I do think these are very interesting ships, very fun to play in a PvE environment where you're not balancing player versus player interactions, you're balancing out player versus the computer and scenarios where honestly it's kind of fun to have such broken abilities that are situational, forcing you to play close, get into the action in a PvE experience. I think that's really, really interesting. For PvP though, it's going to be very difficult for me to think of these ships as balanced when they're fighting against ships that, let's be honest, some of these ships released 10 years ago now. And there's other examples of more modern versions of ships put into the game recently that also aren't very fun to fight if you're playing a line released so long ago. But this is certainly an extra step along that direction of power creep, I gotta say. Hopefully Wargaming reconsiders, but I highly doubt it. When it comes to getting these ships, though, you will have to look in the tech tree, and there will be an experimental ships tab underneath all of the different nations, I suppose. You will need to grind out a few missions to even start to unlock them, and there will be a special currency there for, I think they're called action reports, something like that. And you'll have to research different modules on these ships with those action reports with credits. And with that, you will have access to these ships. Perhaps there will be a bit of credits required to buy them and get access to them in your port at the end of that. Really not sure on how difficult those will necessarily be. We've seen some of the missions when it comes to the public test server But as we know, anytime there's public test servers, they're not really showing you the final economy of the game. They're just testing out the ships, and if the designs are working, there's bugs, all that kind of stuff. I think that's how that's designed. So more than likely, the missions will be much more difficult, and perhaps the requirement of these action reports and credits, all of that will be tuned and more than likely increased on them. So it might take you a little while to grind out these ships. For your efforts, it's not just a waste of time and credits, because these ships will get removed, remember, in a few updates from now. You at least have missions once you have these ships to get coal in return. That is the benefit, I suppose. If you're trying to grind out coal, these experimental ships will give you a combat mission that will allow you to grind that through. Unfortunately, still not able to Citadel Libertad with these guns. Even with that burst at closer ranges. We needed the Oregon, I suppose, to do that, which was pretty cool that I was able to Citadel Libertad. Not that that's a great way of balancing out overpowered ships to release other ones that can deal with it that are also very powerful. I don't know. These things feel a little overtuned to me. Maybe it's... I talked about this a little bit in the Oregon video, right? Where we talk about these new ships lines that come into the game, and we're very quick to call them out as being worthless, maybe not worth grinding, not worth buying ships that are more vanilla, maybe more balanced ships. The overpowered ships we freak out about, right? We exclaim to Wargaming that these ships are too powerful, and then maybe that means that more people get them, more people engage with events on them, and Wargaming's seen that and it decided that we want people to engage with our game, therefore we need to introduce a bunch of overpowered ships, and we'll keep them temporary as to not implement too many overpowered ships in the game at one time. We can rotate them out. I don't know. That's pure speculation on my part that I haven't really thought through yet, but perhaps that's the reason. I talked a little bit about that. As always, when I'm looking at this game, I'm wanting consistency out of broadside ships taking damage, angled ships taking less damage. I've said that forever now, it feels like. And these ships, well, sort of fit that role, with their close range burst fire giving you immense consistency at close range, which I do like. The improved pen angles, and honestly, the amount of overmatch that these ships still retain. I mean, 406s at tier 9 is very, very good still, and 457s is not a downside at tier 10 at all when it comes to overmatch. It doesn't really feel like they're giving up that overmatching ability to gain the consistency against broadsides. It feels like you're just getting that consistency while also being able to smash angled ships as well. That's nothing to speak of this high explosive as well. The high explosive is incredibly powerful on these ships. They don't have to deal with reduced alpha damage, fire chance, anything like that to gain this powerful burst, dispersion, reload buff from fight or flight as well. Where a lot of these other ships that have had burst fires, like Castilla, like Victoria, Numancia, there's so many burst fire ships with F key bursts in the game that give up so much on reload or damage just to gain that burst fire here, which I suppose the range is what you're giving up, but that doesn't feel like too much of a downside to me right now. Although, to be fair, I've only really played these on public test server, which is not very representative of random battles. So it's possible I was more easily able to get closer range to enemy ships to use this burst fire more often. Once I get into random battles on the main server, we all know how passive those games are. So maybe it is more of a downside than I think at the moment. We'll just have to wait and see. And that also extends over to my build. Overly aggressive, likely down to PTS not being very representative of the live server. Here, I only had a 19-point commander on the PTS. I actually did have Kuznetsov on my build, and I took Superintendent with the last 3 points. But other than that, it looked like this. No concealment, rather bold, I think, but very aggressive build. I could drop heavy AP. And one of these one-pointers, probably Grease. I didn't really use HE, so maybe I would have dropped Gunfeeder and taken Concealment instead for a little better detect. It's really not good, but I was too greedy. I think maybe that's something I'm overstating right now with these early looks on the PTS, because PTS really isn't representative. I'm a little worried about that. but I will take a look at them again once they get released into the game, don't you worry. If they get released, hold on. Let me hold out some hope for that. I can't even say that with a straight face. They're coming, guys, unfortunately. Engine boost mod is what I was running here. Other than that, this is the build. No ability to take any extra accuracy on these guns. Again, I like that design and that forethought into your fight or flight skill here being the reason you have better dispersion or not. But then why can we take Adrenaline Rush on top of this skill as well? That's my question yet. It almost makes sense. Almost. Or perhaps the main gun reload should have been nerfed down a little bit harder initially. I don't know. But that is the build that I was running. The armor looks amazing, as you can tell. 40mm deck and upper belt armor. You got a 25mm large upper bow, but you still get an icebreaker, a 50mm icebreaker. Fortunately, though, this ship has a gigantic citadel, and that means you make a mistake, you get absolutely smashed. Only 220mm. There's no spaced armor here either. So this isn't a situation like Oregon, where we see this waterline citadel that is kind of hard to hit. You can hit it, don't get me wrong, but it's not consistent when it goes broadside, where Vyazma, you will smash if it gets caught broadside, which I like, right? We want that kind of gameplay where a ship is going to get punished when it makes a mistake. But maybe these are a little bit overtuned still. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.